Hi, everyone, and welcome back to That UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and my guest today is an experiencer and author. His work includes some of the best known books in the UFO conversation, including the internationally acclaimed Communion, Them, and his latest work, The Fourth Mind. Welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Whitley Strieber.
Well, I'm glad to be back. It's always fun to talk to you. You're a really good interviewer.
I hope so, Whitley. Thank you. Hopefully you enjoy this, and lots of interest from the listeners as well. In the time we've got together, I'd love to try and get to some of their questions that have been sent in. So thank you to everyone who showed an interest as well. When Whitley comes on, there's a lot of questions get sent over. But Whitley, we've been on together 3 or 4 times now, discussing your previous work, and we're going to discuss The Fourth Mind, a book that was released back earlier this year. Now, this is a book that's split into 2 halves. Firstly, about them, then about us. And the first half is a fascinating look at the genetics, the abilities, and the physical properties of the non-human beings that have been a part of your life for so many decades now. But you look at it not only through your own experiences, but you've also drawn from a document that appeared online a few years ago. And you found striking similarities within that document to your experiences, didn't you?
Well, yes, that wouldn't have been enough for me to put it in a book because they could have copied it from my books. But the remarkable thing was that the first thing in the document was something very unique about these beings that I have observed personally, but never reported, and it's not been reported anywhere except in the document. Meaning that the man had to know this. He had to know. And you can't, it's so remarkable and so very unlike what we do. You can't miss it. When you see it, you can't miss it. But very, very few people see it. In fact, as I say, in the whole literature, I don't think it's ever been reported anywhere. The reason I didn't report it is it involves evacuation. We urinate and defecate. Their waste management is very different, and rather disgusting by our standards. And I mentioned it only to Bud Hopkins, who was appalled and said, "Oh, that must be your imagination. That's just absolutely disgusting." And so I never talked about it again in my life. And then there it was in the document. What it involves is their waste material is all liquid. They don't eat. They only can consume liquids, and they have no solids in their waste material. And the waste material comes out through pores in their skin. So, we don't do that.
The document, just for anyone who's unsure, appeared online a few years back, and it was claimed to be from a former molecular biologist who worked for a national security contractor on a secret program to study EBOs, or exobiospheric organisms. The main goal to analyze genome and proteome of EBOs. And for you, like you say, that one thing particular really struck you. Was there anything else within the document, like you say, and I was going to ask you, and I'm glad you brought it up, that really stood out to you as this is particularly interesting, this is particularly unique from your experiences?
Well, the document fits all kinds of details of my experience. It discusses the anatomy of these. There are 2 kinds of the little gray beings with the black eyes that I know of, that I have seen. There may be more, I don't know. But there are small ones who are about 3 feet tall. And then there are taller ones who are about 5 feet tall. The 3-foot tall ones are not, they aren't, they're not independent entities. Let me put it that way. They have very large brains. But these are, I think that the taller ones kind of project themselves into these smaller ones, and they're like avatars. Or if you can imagine having a robot that was connected to you somehow with telemetry, that's what they are. And those are the ones that I heard years ago that we had the bodies that, in fact, I heard from General Arthur Exon in 1988 that the bodies had been recovered at Roswell. He was present in the Air Materiel Command in Wright Field when the bodies were delivered and the debris was delivered. So was one of my uncles. So it was a family story. I mean, not until after I published Communion, but it became one then because they opened up to us a little bit. So all of the above fit my own personal observations of the visitors, of them using their hands. I've seen them many times, and I wish I could say that I spent a long time with them, but over the years, I don't think I've spent collectively an hour of time with them physically, because it's always very brief. But there have been enough instances to where, yes, I could compare the document to my own experiences in some detail. And the document was really very accurate.
That's really interesting. You mentioned that collectively all those decades of experiences for you amounts to perhaps an hour of what we would understand an hour of time is. Do you feel you've experienced that hour as if you were experiencing this conversation right now? Or do you feel
No,
it's more flashes?
no, it's never been like this. Their mind, it kind of takes you over. In other words, when you're with them, you're in a telepathic union with them, and it's much more than hearing someone talk in your head. It's like being part of them.
Hmm.
It's a very different experience from anything we're used to. This is why people don't remember it, and why I'm quite sure that I haven't remembered everything. And I could have been with them much more than than I have in my memory. Because the other thing they can do is they can control memory very easily. They can do such extraordinary things. Like, if, for example, in this flat where I'm sitting right now, a couple of weeks ago, all of the lights, they didn't go out like a power failure. They stayed on, but the light stopped working. We don't even have words for it. And it was just the most bizarre thing you could ever imagine. And I managed to take I have cameras in here, and there was a video made of this incident. It only lasted a couple of seconds, but I noticed that something was off. It felt like I was losing my vision, is what it felt like. And I thought, my God, am I going blind? And then it was back to normal. And I thought, what in the world is that? Felt like it was something happening in the flat to the lights, but they didn't flicker or anything. And when I looked on the camera, one image is normal, and the next image, you can still see the lights are all on. They're still normal, but the light just doesn't work. It's just black, dark. The room is dark, and yet it's light outside. You can see that through the doorway. And this is the sort of thing that happens when you have them in your life. I have no idea what that was about, no idea how it was done, what was done, or anything. But this is living with this. There's so much like that. That's just one of thousands of incidents. But the one thing that's rare is when they come here physically. It does happen. I have a little mark on my left leg that's been there for years. It's what in the medieval period was called a witch's mark, and would certainly have gotten me burned at the stake. So fortunately, that's passé now. So in any case, they come. Oh, they used to come about every 6 months, and I would feel a little prick in my leg, and they would be under the covers in the bed. And it usually happened when I was awake. And so I just would remain very still because I didn't know what it was, but it obviously wasn't hurting me. And maybe it was something important. So I just let it be. I'm like that. I'm not going to try to control my environment any more than necessary. However, one time this little being shows up. I guess it was about 4 o'clock in the 2 o'clock in the morning, and it wakes me up because I can feel something between my legs. And I think, well, I have no cat, no dog, no animals, no pets. There's no rats in here. And I'm still coming up out of sleep, and it frightens me, and I jump. It leaps up out of flies in a black blob, and you can't see it in any detail, flies off into the loo that is attached to that bedroom, and is gone. And I'm left with these scratches on my legs, which I took pictures of. And that's the kind of physical event that will take place. Another time, I tried, for weeks, begging them, will you please, someone come and stay here for 2 weeks? And I didn't get any reply. So I said, well, how about a week? How about a day? How about an hour? Eventually, I said, I want 15 seconds. And I got 5 seconds. I got about 5 seconds. There was someone hit me on the shoulder when I was asleep. I woke up, and there was one of these little people standing beside the bed, looking at me. And I tried to open my mind and take my attention off of my thought processes and put it on my body to open my mind so that there could be a connection. And it was very brief, but it was more like a sort of a hi there kind of thing. And then it was gone, and the being disappeared. So getting physical contact is extremely difficult for me. And I always wonder when people say they have extensive physical contact, whether or not they're fantasizing, because these beings seem extremely hesitant. For example, for us to touch them, I've never been able to do that. I don't know. In all the letters we received, I didn't see many, and I don't think I recall anyone who initiated touch. I've been touched many times, but not initiated.
Have you ever managed to work out why, when these entities or beings can communicate, when they can do what they need to do, whether it's taking over psychically, telepathically, why they even bother to turn up physically at all? Is there a correlation as to why they're there physically at any time?
I've had not much physical contact, but they turned up for example, in 1985, very physically, and took me out of the house and took me wherever they took me. I didn't see it from the outside, only from the inside, although one of my neighbors did see it and said it was a thing like a UFO hanging in a field near our houses. He heard me screaming inside it. It's why I knew he was too scared to go near it, and it took him a year to tell me he had witnessed it because he was so ashamed. And I said, listen, you made the right decision. I don't think you should have gone anywhere close to it. In any case, subsequently, there have been physical contacts, some of them very intimate and powerful, but always initiated by them, never by me. In other words, I can't reach out and touch one of them, even if it's in the room. It will touch me. And incidentally, when they do touch you, there's this electricity that goes through your body. It's very nice. It feels lovely, but they can strengthen it. And when they strengthen it, then you can't move anymore. It takes over your nervous system.
In the second half of the book, Whitley, you focus on ourselves as a species and you discuss missing time and you refer to it as a sort of anesthetic, a short term anesthetic with no sense of going under. Do you believe that missing time can affect us differently in the same way individuals have a sensitivity to anesthetic and the effects can vary?
It's not exactly the same thing as an anesthetic. I don't quite say that. It's different. I think I know how it's done. I think that the hippocampus is turned off. The hippocampus is where the brain organizes its awareness of time. And when it's turned off, you're turned off. You're still functional, by the way, and memories are still being deposited, but you don't know it. It's more profound than chemical anesthesia. And it's not something we could do to someone. We don't know how to turn off one part of the brain and leave the rest of it functioning. But this is almost certainly how they do it, because there just isn't any other modality that would work like that in the human brain. So that's what they do. That's what missing time is. And God, I've had missing time in an airport so I've suspected that there might be people involved with them who can do it, or they might be able to look human. I just don't know. But I give you an example. I was with one of the only other people who has ever had, I'm second generation, obviously, but I've been spoken to directly by somebody who was aware of the bodies, who had seen the bodies and held the bodies. And so had this other person. And we compared notes. That happened up in Seattle. And then I went back to Los Angeles, flew back, got off the plane. I had been upgraded to first class, to my astonishment. And I was in the first row. So I was also the first person off the plane. And I walked down the jetway. I could hear people walking behind me. There was no one in front of me. I walked what seemed to me directly to the baggage claim. And it was dark and there was nobody there. And I thought, well, of course, I'm the first passenger out. So I waited for the lights to come on and waited for the lights to come on. They didn't. And they didn't. And finally, I realized I'd been waiting 15 minutes. And not only have the lights not come on, nobody showed up. So I went to the baggage office, which was lit in the far back of the baggage claim area, on the theory that maybe I'd gone to the wrong baggage claim. And I was going to ask them where the correct baggage claim was. And as I walked up to it, I saw sitting in front of it a couple of suitcases that looked strangely like mine. I thought, my God, those look exactly like my suitcases, because my suitcases are bright blue. They're not black. I've gone the black suitcase route and found out the problem. People end up with the wrong suitcase all the time.
Yeah.
So they're very recognizable. And I thought to myself, how odd that somebody else has blue suitcases, and they've even got the little same thing. They've got the same brand I do. And I walked up and I looked and I thought, my God, those are my suitcases. And I said to the baggage claim man who was in the office, I said, excuse me, these are my suitcases. And he said, oh, we pulled them off. They've been there for 45 minutes. I have no way of accounting for that 45 minutes. To me, I walked directly from the plane, stopped in the John for a few seconds, maybe 3 minutes, and then walked onto the baggage claim. It's totally seamless, but at least 40 minutes are missing. 40 minutes. And I don't know how to get to that. It probably a really skilled hypnotist like Dr. Donald Klein, who knows what they're doing, could help me. But haven't come across a person like Dr. Klein. He was unique in the world. He was the greatest forensic hypnotist, one of the greatest ones that ever lived, and the head of the New York State Department of Psychiatry. He was the one who hypnotized me after the communion experience, and a man of immense reputation and extraordinary skill. And then I can't go to a UFO hypnotist because, I'm just, the fact that I'm with such a person is going to bias my memories for sure. So, this is missing time. And as I say, I've worked with a neurologist about this, discussed this extensively with a neurologist, a research neurologist, and read up on the brain. And we came to the conclusion the only way it can happen is if the hippocampus is turned off. And that must be what happened. And whoever I met in that airport obviously must have been human or looked human, or the other people would have become very excited, and that didn't happen. And they must have been wanting to talk to me about the discussion I'd had about the bodies. That's the only explanation. There are cameras all over airports, but unfortunately, I was not able to get the bureaucracy to release any video of the time I was walking through the airport. And by the time I finally figured out how to get through to the right people, it works on a cycle. It's not kept. And it was already gone. So, yeah, there you have it.
No, that's really, really fascinating. And within the book, you mention and I've written down how to pronounce the word properly here because it's difficult. De-mytholization of the visitors is how we begin to move forward and understand more. Can you talk about how, as a society, we begin to do that?
Yeah. This is a very important part of the fourth mind. We have to de-mythologize these entities. They are people of a different sort. They have a lot of things about them that are different. But when you come down to it, they are people. They come from some kind of a culture. They have lives, motivations, needs, and that puts them on the spectrum of real beings. They are not gods. They are not angels. They are not demons. They don't belong to our mythology at all. But I think a lot of our mythology may belong to them. Certainly, the UFO mythology belongs to them. And I think a lot of our past mythology, when we saw the gods of various kinds, belongs to them. Those are really them in different forms and different appearing in different ways. I think that they have tried to establish a relationship with us many times over our history, and probably before our history too, and always failed because we misinterpreted what they were. We thought of them as something other than what they are. And one of the things I'm trying to achieve here with the fourth mind is to give people a way to see them as beings that are outside of the context of the supernatural, that they are natural beings. And this is particularly difficult because I think that they are not fundamentally embodied. In other words, I think they inhabit those bodies, but I don't think they live in them all the time. I think they can come and go. And that makes them a very, very different cultural proposition from us. Among other things, it means that they are in contact with each other in consciousness in ways that we cannot imagine. It may be that they essentially have only one mind, but many bodies and many different personalities, but only a single mind. And that would account for their slowness and lack of creativity and their extraordinary devices that they have, which, like the UFOs, they're not. My uncle one of the first things he said is when he had looked into the inside the Roswell craft, there was nothing in it. There was no motor, as he put it, and that was because we know now that the surface, the material that it was made of, was very much more sophisticated. It looked to our people like metal, a very thin metal that you couldn't shoot a bullet through because they tried. And they tried it at the air base, and again, they tried it under controlled conditions at Wright Field, and they couldn't do it. The bullets would skim off of it. They wouldn't go through it. Yet they had the metal that had been torn to pieces by a force of some kind that was greater than anything we could apply to it at the time. And still, I mean, probably if we put an atomic bomb, we would have done something to it. But we wouldn't have known that because the experimenters would be vaporized too. So now we're getting into just at the edge, and I don't want to discuss this extensively. I've heard, and I've never been told it was anything classified, but I've heard that we're beginning to be able to understand how to create materials that have an intelligence of their own, not like memory metal, which will go back to its original shape no matter what you do to it, but materials that can look back at you. And I have experienced enough of the Roswell materials to know how important that is. I've said to people working on them many times, don't forget, when you work on these look at these materials, they're looking back at you, because we're dealing with something that is exponentially beyond where we are, but not something we can't reach. So all of this adds up to, let's try to demythologize them and humanize them and see them as vulnerable, real creatures. Then we begin to be able to explore more deeply why they are here.
Do you believe opening up more people to that reality will bring these entities to a bigger audience, where more people, more of the general public, will begin to have these experiences or begin to see them?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that opening up our cultures to this in a non-supernatural way is going to enable us to think about it in new ways. And that will cause significant changes in the way we relate to them, therefore also in the way they relate to us. What that would result in their side of the relationship, I can't predict. I don't think it would be fair to me to try.
Have you ever spoken, you mentioned other cultures, to folks of maybe a less westernized persuasion, indigenous peoples or others who maybe are more accepting of the reality of a non-human intelligence, about your own experiences?
Well, yeah, I've talked to some people at the Pine Ridge Lakota Sioux Reservation, and they're of very definitely different minds. That some of them, one of the chiefs thought it was just absurd and didn't think I had any business coming on the reservation and talking about such nonsense. Others were much more open to it and could relate it to their own cultural experience. But once again, and the Hopi people I've never talked to them, but they have extensive beliefs about the people who come from underground, and the visitors. Some of them definitely do come from underground. There's no question of that. I've had plenty of experience with that. So, but, and you can certainly see them as looking like gigantic ants, extremely disorienting and upsetting ants. So they, those two cultures have this in their culture in one way or another. A lot of the indigenous peoples in the world, in the Amazon and so forth, have this in their culture. In Hinduism, it's present in various ways. In Islam, present as the jinn. But all of these, we have to get past all of this, all of it, and get to the point where we are looking at them like we look at ourselves, but at the same time respecting the differences and not seeing them through the lens of myth at all.
To your knowledge, are these beings performing similar, let's just use the word missions, on other planets to different species like they do to us?
I have no idea.
Never something you've came across, no?
No, I have no information on that.
And when we last spoke in 2024, you mentioned this book, not by name, but you were trying to finish it, and you mentioned it was one you were finding difficult to finish, that there were individuals or players that they didn't want you to finish the book. And of course, we're glad to see you got it over the finish line. But how difficult was it to finish this book?
There was resistance on the psychic level, I guess I would put it. And I overcame it by deciding that the hell with them, I'm going to do my book. And I had a feeling afterwards that possibly the resistance was to make me buckle down and work. In other words, they made me mad enough to finish the book. But that often happens to me. I've had lots of trouble. Like the previous book, there was trouble, plenty of trouble. I finally went to England and finished it in the UK because I was having so much trouble in this flat. And I stayed with some friends in the UK, and it worked well. They were very welcoming, and I didn't have the feeling of being watched and troubled. And then the previous book, A New World, I finished at my family's country house in Texas, where I'd met the visitors many times as a child. And I would sit in the living room, and they would be on the porch immediately outside. There were big floor-to-ceiling windows. It's an old house. And we would work together telepathically, and it was very, very fun and comfortable and easy. And until my aunt, who was upstairs in bed, she heard shuffling feet scraping along the summer porch, the sleeping porch upstairs. And then she heard a voice go, "Why aren't you asleep?" And she said to me, I could hear her, she could call down easily from upstairs. It's not hard. She said, "Whitley, is that you?" And I said, "No, it's not." And she said, "Well, your friends are here, and they're annoyed that I can't go to sleep." And so I went up and I said, "How do you think?" I said, "I don't think you're going to be able to go to sleep now that they're telling you to go to sleep." She said, "Well, of course not. Now I can't go to sleep." But being the way they are, a few minutes later, she was asleep. And we continued working downstairs. But that was unusual. And this is the book in which the fascinating part about this is, why would they work on a book that contains details about the injuries to human beings and the deaths of some people? But they didn't bother them in the least. They were perfectly happy for that to be in. And they certainly knew it.
You mentioned before there's almost a collective, a oneness, a hive mind-esque approach with these beings. Do you ever feel that there may be differing opinion amongst them? Is that even something that's possible with these beings, that some may want to have one approach, others may want to have another?
I think that phrase hive mind must come out of the military because it's so fantastically inadequate. They are an incredibly complex intellectual presence. And I am quite sure that the tall ones all have separate personalities, but they share the same information flow. In other words, the same mind, but it's not a hive mind where everybody is always of the same exact mind. What it is a singular mind. And I think it lacks creativity. It lacks a sense of question. It's very slow to make decisions because it doesn't have any, there's no one to compare notes with. In a sense, it's alone. And even though they do have separate personalities to an extent, I think it's essentially the entire species feels alone. I think they feel alone. I've never seen any trace of any artwork among them. I do see hieroglyphics of a sort quite frequently. In fact, most recently this morning at about 3. I see them a lot. And they hang them in the window in this bedroom in this flat, and I just look at them. I can't understand them intellectually. I just look at them. And when I look at them, then later, quite often, it turns out things are happening in my life that I already know will happen because the hieroglyphics have told me on a level that I'm not consciously aware of.
Mm.
So we'll see what happens with those. We're there this morning. And it happened. I do have one image. I have quite a bit of video of unusual things happening in here. Unfortunately, no video of them. I wish I did have it. But I was at a friend's house in the apartment in New York, staying with them. And it looks out, the bedroom that I was in looks out over an open space. And then beyond that is another building. It's New York, full of tall buildings. And then a view out to the Hudson River. And I woke up for the meditation. I do a meditation at about 3:00 every morning. And the hieroglyphics were hanging down the side of the building across the way, all the way down, and glowing bright orange. And it was just the most remarkable thing. I thought to myself, can anyone else see this? So I got my phone, and I was wide awake. I mean, I was not in an altered state of any kind at this point. And I aimed it at them and took a picture. Only the picture just is a completely blurred out mass of orange light. And then I took another picture when they were gone, and you can see the buildings perfectly from the same position. So they were there. There was something they affected the camera. And as to whether or not anyone else saw them, I don't know. At that hour, I wouldn't think so. And knowing the Greys, they would control the ability of other people to see them if they didn't want them seen. So this happens. It happens all the time. And in this flat, if I don't get up for the 3:00 meditation, for years, after Annie passed away in 2015, about 6 months later, they began waking me up for the 3:00 meditation by pinching. What did they do first? Oh yeah, they electrified one of my toes, shocked one of my toes. Then they pinched one of my nipples the next night. And I figured it out that someone wanted me to do the meditation. They'd been doing, back in the 90s, they went through a period of wanting to do this at this time. So I was familiar with this process. And from then, until the 2023, I guess, they woke me up every night, one way or another, often in very droll ways, like sounding a school bell in the living room. I would get every once in a while a little dry kiss. I would get someone to shake my nose, And it was not unpleasant at all. It was quite fun. And the feeling that there was somebody who, some disembodied presence like that wanted to meditate with me was rather wonderful, So and then I discovered someone on my website on Unknown Country, one of the people who inhabit that website has got a lot of wonderful people in the social media part of it. Said, Whitley, there's something called Brahma Muhurta time, which is the time about an hour and a half before dawn, when the mind is thought to be most open and most accessible to information from the outside. And I realized that's why it changes, because when I would wake myself up at 3 with an alarm, it didn't work. In other words, they had to be here. You had to be able to see you had to have some kind of indication that they were present and ready to do it. And the time was always slightly different. And the reason is, of course, an hour and a half before dawn is slightly different every day. So that's how I do it now. I try to do it naturally. And if I fail at doing it naturally, waking up naturally at the right time, or close enough to it to where I can start the meditation at the right time, they'll get angry and wake me up rather brutally. I mean, not brutally, but rather, let me put it this way, they wake me up in ways that will definitely wake you up. And because they feel that I'm far enough along now to where I shouldn't need that support. I should be on my own 2 feet. And that's how it is. It's how it is living with them.
What's the message? Sorry,
no, go ahead.
What's the message you want readers to take away from the book? There's a lot of information in there, but what ultimately do you want that final page when it's closed? What do you want to be left?
Well, I want them to think that what is wrong here is nobody's fault. There's nobody to blame. What happened to us in the distant past was not a war in space or the angry gods or anything like that. It was just the most powerful God of them all, nature itself, pure chance, that has put this planet in a very vulnerable corner of this little galaxy we are in. It's an area of the galaxy which, for reasons we don't understand, there are many supernovas, many stars explode in this general region. And 12,000 years ago, the physical debris from such an explosion reached our solar system and nearly extinguished this species. And we were tremendously traumatized. We were traumatized more deeply than you can even imagine. That the species were reduced to a shadow of its former self by this. And we are still in a state of amnesia, traumatic amnesia about it. And we need to come to a new level of acceptance and love of ourselves, and acceptance of the fact that we didn't do anything wrong. There was no original sin. There is nothing wrong. There was no war in space, like as you see in the Gitas. Those things didn't happen. What did happen was just by pure chance, for 1,000 years, debris from a supernova swept through this solar system and left this planet in a state of perpetual chaos and nearly extinguished the human species, and did extinguish many species during that period. That's when the Ice Age ended, when all of our flood stories come from. We need to be more comfortable with ourselves and our past, and to believe more deeply in the value of us, to restore the lost community of man, which was lost before history even began. History is not an achievement. It is the outcome of the fact that we have become wanderers in the world of the psyche. We in the West are trapped in a Cartesian prison We need to escape that prison. We need to open the doors and face the fact that the physical world that we can see around us isn't the only world, nor is it the other levels of it are other levels of it undetectable. They're not undetectable. We just have to figure out how to detect them. What we call the supernatural, my dear friend, the Rice University religion professor, Jeff Kripal, with whom I wrote the book Supernatural, 2 words, puts it best. He says, there is no supernatural, but there is a supernatural. We have to extend our intelligence into understanding that level clearly and objectively. We will then be able to restore skills and abilities that we need if we're going to survive as a species. One of the main ones is telepathy. We had that, and we can have it again. There are children here who have it. You can see on or hear on Spotify or any Apple Podcasts or anywhere, a series called the Telepathy Tapes about spellers, unvoiced children who are telepathic. I know and can communicate with people who are telepathic. I cannot initiate it, but when they initiate it, I can communicate with them very easily because that's how I communicate with the visitors. And you can too, and everyone can. We just don't know it. We have to relearn our real powers. As to the visitors, what I said earlier pertains. We can't move ahead unless we demythologize them. We forget about all of the different species, the aliens from this planet or that star or this or that. That's all folklore. All we know is somebody is here, and they don't function the same way we do. They're not gods, they're not demons, they're not angels. They may not even be aliens in the way that we have been assuming. And I think the first thing we need to do is to throw out all of the stories about the different species and so forth, because we don't know any of that yet. And once we've done all of this, we've cleaned up the alien mythology and the older mythologies and begun to see them as ordinary beings and begun to see us as a species that was badly injured by a cosmic event that had no relationship to anything. It was just chance. Then we will start to become free and start to become more ourselves, empowered in this universe in the way that we should be. That's a long speech. That's the answer to the question.
Do you know what? It's a lovely way to wrap up. And I would, other than ask you, how can people pick up a copy of The Fourth Mind? What's the best way?
Well, there's lots of easy ways, and they're all called Amazon and Audible. You can get The Fourth Mind from Amazon. You can go on if you want a signed copy of the hardcover, you can go on my website. There are signed copies for sale there. And they do go all over the world. So you can, I don't know what will happen to it, trying to ship it from the US. And I don't have the capability of shipping signed copies within the UK yet, sadly enough. But so that's probably not going to happen, but you can get physical copies from Amazon. You can get Kindles, of course, and the audiobook from Audible. And I read the audiobook, and I'm a good reader. You'll find it good.
Excellent. Well, Whitley, thank you so much for your time. I always appreciate speaking to you and look forward to hosting you again in the future.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.